All right, we are live back on the Andre Duke Show with Carter Smith. Carter, how you doing?
Good, man. I'm doing good. It's a nice little Monday. Had a great weekend with my kids, hung out, went to the pool Saturday, had a little birthday celebration for my now 7-year-old Sunday. Went to this brewery that had a bunch of food trucks, live music, bunch of stuff for the kids to do. So it was a good weekend, man. Can't complain at all. What about you? How was your weekend?
Weekend was good. Got a little NCAA played. Went to the beach for a little bit, and that's about it.
What beach? Like Chicago?
But yeah, up there
Yeah.
in the in
Okay.
the in the region.
I got you. It's fun, man. That's great. Well, excited to get going, get our week started, kick us off, talk about a little bit about the football that was played this weekend, a little bit about fall camp and things going on here in college sports. But really just getting pumped up, man. Under 20 days until we are officially back in college football season. So pumped up, man. I am ready to go. I'm itching for it. I don't know about you, but here in Columbus, it's been like low 60s, high 50s at night and in the early morning. So I woke up this morning, went outside. I was like, man, it's starting to feel a little football-y out here. I like it.
Yeah, getting it going. The leaves will start changing soon, and it is gonna be a good time.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Well, big show for you. Got a lot to talk about, obviously, with fall camp, preseason NFL, some random things. Top AP top 25 dropped today, so we'll talk about that. And then I wanted to go through because we have a little under 3 weeks until Notre Dame's first game. So going to use the next few shows to kind of go through and give a preview and kind of break down some of their opponents or potential playoff opponents, things like that, and just talk about some of the better programs in college football, kind of how they stack up and what to expect from them. But first thing I want to bring up, I think you sent this to me, but the George Mason basketball team, which everybody I'm sure knows George Mason from their epic tournament runs over the past decade or so. They've become really relevant. But this was weird to me. I'm gonna put it up here on the screen here, but just went down. They scheduled a nice little trip to the Bahamas, to kick off their basketball summer or season or whatever. And this is how they kind of what was awaiting them when they got there, when they found out about it here. And so let's go ahead and put that on the screen there. So in epic fashion, they were scheduled for a foreign tour in the Bahamas. They arrived at the airport and the team discovered that there were no flights, no hotels, and no games. The trip was canceled by the hosting company, although boosters, donors had already arrived in the Bahamas. And it just reminded me, man, this is the fire festival of college basketball. Like, get sold this, you're going to be in the Bahamas, your players are going to have a great time, but boosters and donors are all psyched up. Like, dude, we get a trip to the Bahamas, go down there, sit on the beach, sip some drinks, go watch a little George Mason basketball, get ready for the basketball season coming up. And turns out that they were sold a bunch of nothing.
Yeah, that is an unfortunate turn of events. And yes, that is Fire Festival. I had seen that and I'm like, we gotta talk about this. This is not a
I
good
just want to
look.
know I want to know who the hosting company was. Like, how does this happen? You normally, if you're going on one of these like tournaments in the Bahamas, Kentucky does it all the time. It's usually put on by a reputable company, like a CBS, SEC Big Ten Challenge or something like that. But for whatever reason, obviously they got swindled a little bit here. And poor George Mason, man. You go to a school like George Mason, you're not going to be playing, on big time TV. You're not going to have the opportunities of big time programs. You hear about going to the Bahamas. I bet the players were jacked up, the families, everybody that was going to go. And then you get to the airport ready to go. You're about to go sit on the beach. Just be told, oh, hey, you don't have a flight, you don't have a hotel, and you're not playing any basketball.
Wow, I would have hung out in the Bahamas. You could,
Yeah, well, I guess that's the question. Did they discover this after they got to the Bahamas? But I mean, I doubt it. I bet they got to the airport of wherever and realized we don't have a flight out of here, right? They didn't have a flight to the Bahamas. So
yeah.
but the boosters and donors probably had a great time.
Well, not only that, I would say the SID is probably in some trouble.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, how you let this happen at any university, but George Mason's at least somewhat prominent because of their recent success in the March Madness, but it was just wild to me. I mean, I don't know how you let that happen, but either way, they did. So that was funny. I want to jump in and talk a little bit about the NFL preseason because we've had a chance now. We had the Hall of Fame game 2 weeks ago. A lot of teams geared up this weekend and played. I think everybody pretty much. And big news out of Cleveland today. Deshaun Watson has been cleared for contact. He is a full participant in practice going forward. He's not going to play this Saturday, but Kevin Stefanski did say he will play in the final preseason game, which is good news for Browns fans everywhere. And just, hopefully he's healthy, fully healthy. I know Bengals fans got to see one drive of a healthy Joe Burrow this past weekend. So Browns fans are just looking forward to that. And I did see on the old Twitter machine, Deshaun throwing to Amari. And I want to show you this because this is what Amari Cooper still is just that guy. And I know there was a lot of trade talk with him and Brandon Ayuk, and there's been some questions on if Amari's actually happy in Cleveland after an IG story was posted after the trade details were leaked that he would have been sent to the 49ers, and all he said was, LOL, I wouldn't mind that at all. So, but here's Deshaun Watson throwing a little pass to Amari just to get Browns fans excited for what's to come. Gotta love that. Gotta love that. Amari Cooper doing his thing, and that's Martin Emerson on the coverage there, who is no slouch. So he got it done. Deshaun Watson's out there. I've seen a lot of clips, man. I think Deshaun Watson's poised to have a big year as long as he can stay healthy.
Right. When it comes to the Deshaun Watson stuff, I really am on the on the fence about whether he can stay healthy. And for me, I'm kind of just he's got to go out there and show me at this point.
For sure. He hasn't been healthy since being in Cleveland. Obviously dealt with the 11-game suspension when he first got there for getting a hand job during a massage or whatever. But since then, he hasn't been able to stay healthy. So we'll see if he's able to stay healthy. He looked good at times last year when he was healthy. Unfortunately, that's just not been the case the past 2 years. So that'll be big. Another big development from Browns minicamp on the injury and health front. It looks like Nick Chubb's coming back, man. Nick Chubb is running full speed sprints after practice. He's working his way back, and this guy is just an absolute, alien. Here, let me show you. Have you seen the video yet?
Yes, him doing the squats.
Yeah, this is just insane. So let me get this up here for you. This is 8 months after surgery, and that is, what is that? 6 plates on each side. So that's 45 times 6 would be 540, like 600 pounds or something like that, 500 some pounds. 8 months after having his knee completely reconstructed. I mean, this guy is just not human. I also don't know what the purpose of putting that much weight on the bar is for. He's doing multiple reps, I guess. That's insane, man. I mean, that's inhuman. That's not supposed to happen. You're not supposed to be able to do that, especially not 8 months after surgery. But he's going to be back, man. He won't be back for the start of the season, but I'm telling you, if you play fantasy football and you're in the late rounds and you're looking for a running back 4 or something like that, that's insane. I mean, yeah, exactly. 540 in plates alone, bars 45. So you're talking about 585 pounds, 8 months after completely having his knee reconstructed for the second time. I mean, it's just absolutely insane what this guy's able to do. And A lot of people want to count him out because of the injuries. I learned a long time ago, don't ever let that happen. Don't ever count him out because he's going to be back. And I think he's going to be one of the better running backs in the NFL by the end of the year.
Right. I just, it's one of those that I don't think Nick Chubb is going to be ready to go at the beginning of the season, but when he gets unleashed, it's going to be tough sledding for the defenses out there because I think Cleveland will run the ball and they're going to run it well.
Absolutely. Some other news out of preseason NFL, every rookie quarterback taken in the first round got a chance to play this weekend. I wanted to just go through kind of the stats and break down, what we thought of them. We'll start with the number 1 overall pick. Did you get to see much of Caleb Williams?
I haven't went back and watched all the preseason stuff. I'll probably get back and get into doing that probably tomorrow morning. Go through, watch all the guys play. The big one that is not on the list, and I think that there's gonna be some smoke if Drake May struggles, is Joe Milton. The Patriots fans are. I got to watch some of his highlights. I get it; he's doing it against backups, but for the average Joe out there, whenever Drake May struggles, they're going to say, "Put Milton in." So it's going to be. Oh, yeah. I think Gerard Mayo's just going to have to pick one and go with it because I think he's in a tough spot trying to completely rebuild the franchise after Bill Belichick ran it straight into the ground.
Well, the thing is, this is what Joe Milton does. He did it at Michigan. He did it at Tennessee. He's doing it for the Patriots. He's going to give you some highlights in practice that are like, oh, man, this guy can play. He can't play. If he could play, he would have been drafted. He would have been starting. He can throw the ball really far. That's it. That's all. He can throw it 175 yards. He's got an arm like a cannon. But Joe Milton will never be a starting quarterback in the NFL, I promise you. He hardly was a starting quarterback in college football. He was supposed to be the next Vince Young, freaking everything at Michigan. Dud. Went to Tennessee, sat behind Hendon Hooker, was supposed to take over and be a Heisman candidate. Dud. He got drafted. He's showing flashes in rookie minicamp and preseason against the threes. And that's the other thing you have to understand with all these rookie quarterbacks that went out there on this weekend and played. Guys, you have to understand they're playing against people that aren't going to be on NFL rosters come 3 weeks from now. So calm down. I'll go through the stats for you. Caleb Williams, 4 of 7, 95 yards, 101 QBR. Jaden Daniels, 2 of 3, 45 yards, 109 QBR. Drake May, 2 of 3, 19 yards, 84 QBR. In an absolute torrential downpour, terrible situation. Michael Penix Jr., 9 of 16, 104 yards, 76 QBR. Here's the golden boy that everybody's crowning already after one preseason game. J.J. McCarthy, 11 of 17, 188 yards, 2 touchdowns and a pick, 116 QBR. Bo Nix, 15 of 21, 125 yards, a touchdown, 102 QBR. If you notice, the first 3 barely played because they're actually probably going to start. The next 3 played a lot more because they might not. J.J. McCarthy was efficient, looked good out there. Again, he's going against guys that aren't going to be on an NFL team, most of them. Bo Nix, same thing. Bo Nix had 5 drives. He scored on 4 of them, so that's good. That looks good. Bo Nix is probably going to be the starter in Denver after a couple weeks because they really have nothing with Jared Stidham or something like that. And J.J. McCarthy might be the starter by the end of the year because it's Sam Darnold. Michael Penix Jr. is not going to start this year. You have $100 million man Kirk Cousins. He's going to be the starter when he's healthy. So, I mean, take it with a grain of salt, but it was good to see. J.J. McCarthy, I will say, looked the best. He looks like somebody that has potential to be an NFL quarterback. Bo Nix looked a lot of what he was at Oregon, a lot of moving around, making throws on the run, kind of hitting dinks and dunks. His average completion was like 6 yards. So I didn't see anything that wowed me. People are already crowning Caleb Williams a Hall of Famer, saying he looked incredible. Again, I don't put a whole lot of stock in rookie play in preseason. I as a Browns fan, I saw it firsthand last year. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, DTR, was supposed to be this excellent backup. He was. That's why we got rid of what's his name. Ended up playing for the Vikings. I can't remember his name, but we got rid of him because DTR was the backup, and then Watson got hurt, and we had to play PJ Walker and DTR, and figured out that both of them suck, and so we had to go sign Joe Flacco and let him save the season for us. So none of these guys have proven anything. Caleb Williams looks like Caleb Williams looks like what you would expect a first overall pick to look like. He looks like he can play football. The problem is he's always looked really good against terrible defenses. And in the preseason, you're not playing a true NFL defense. Nobody has their star players out there. Nobody has anybody who's going to be on the field a whole lot out there against Caleb Williams. So he looked efficient. He looked good. But once he lines up against Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, some of these like actual studs on defense in the NFL, it's going to look a lot different. Just go back and watch the Notre Dame game last year and look what Caleb Williams looked like against a real defense. He threw 3 picks and he looked like ass.
Right. Trying to evaluate these rookies right now is really tough. Obviously, you're not there every day in camp. A lot of this is, overhyped. I don't think you're going to know anything until they get on the field playing against real defenses when the bullets are flying, when you have, when you have Myles Garrett rushing you. That's when you're going to find out what a lot of these guys are. And I've heard Coach JB talk about this at length, and also Zach talk about this, that they're both, to me, from their opinions that they've given ever since the end of the college football season till now, it sounds like they're out on both of them. So we'll see. We'll see what the Bears end up doing here. But there's podcasts out there saying the Bears are going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't know. I've seen they're going to make the NFC Championship game. But here's the other thing: if they do make the playoffs, if the Bears are successful, don't think that it's a Justin Fields thing. Caleb Williams has a better supporting cast this year than Justin Fields ever had in Chicago. Ever. They have a better offensive line. They have better weapons at receiver. They got better weapons at running back. I mean, he has talent around him. So if he is successful, good job by the Bears for finally figuring out how to put a team together. But it's not a direct Justin Fields versus Caleb Williams correlation. Now, if they hadn't gone out and gotten the players they did in the offseason, in trades and free agency, things like that in the draft, I mean, they went out and drafted Rome Odunze. They picked up Keenan Allen?
Yeah.
And they have DJ Moore. Those are 3 legit wide receivers. A first-round wide receiver, 3, I guess, but then proven wide receivers in DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. Tight end position is awesome. Running back, they went out and got who was it? It was the guy that he played in Detroit before. But anyways,
yeah.
And so they have talent around him finally, and they bolstered the offensive line. So if he is successful, which I don't think he's going to be as successful as people think, it's not just because Caleb Williams came in and was an excellent quarterback or anything like that. But regardless, the rookies went out. Some of them showed out. Drake May looked pedestrian, but again, he handed the ball off every play except for 3. And I think 2 of those 3 passes were like screen passes on 3rd and 12. So, but all in all, rookies went out and played. I'm excited to continue to see the preseason because I think we'll start to see some more starters play as we get into the 2nd and 3rd preseason games. Really excited to see what, some of the teams, like obviously Pat Mahomes isn't going to play, things like that. But Joe Burrow went out and played. It was good to see him back on the football field. So it's exciting, man. Football's back. We got, games this weekend again, and then we'll get back into it. AP, I did want to touch on the AP poll. Top 25 for the preseason came out. Really nothing that crazy. I think for the most part, it was pretty similar to what the other top 25 poll kit that came out was. Obviously, Georgia 1, Ohio State 2, Oregon 3, Texas 4, Bama 5. Pretty much the expected top 5. Ole Miss, Notre Dame, Penn State, Michigan, and then Florida State at 10. Florida State, obviously, we'll touch on here in a little bit. Anything shocking to you on that list?
Looking at it, I don't know how you have USC ranked 23, but
yeah, I mean, I guess just Lincoln Riley's name alone in USC, I'm not sure. I mean, they have zero defense. They have an unknown at quarterback who looked decent when he came in last year. They have talent. I mean, they recruited decently, so they have talent all over the place. But they're going to be first year in the Big Ten. I think it's going to be a little bit of a rude awakening when they have to play teams like Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, things like that, and then also deal with Oregon and whatnot. But I'd have to look at their schedule. I've looked at it before, and I always forget who they do and don't play this year in the Big Ten. But I know they play Michigan, and I believe Oregon. They don't play Ohio State, so that's good for them. But other than that, I mean, 23, yeah, I mean, there's some teams on this list, probably some teams even in the top 10, top 15 that won't be ranked at the end of the season. If you had to pick one team, let's say in the top 15 that's ranked right now that'll be unranked at the end of the year, who would you pick?
I would go, I think Clemson.
Yep.
Because I think they're going to struggle offensively. Now their defense is legit. The ACC is a little bit weaker, but I think Clemson will fall out of the top 15. Now, a team that I think that could make a huge stride and go forward is Kansas. I really like Kansas. I think they got a lot of momentum in there. They're rebuilding their football stadium. I like Lance Leipold. I think by the end of the year, Kansas will. I think they're a potential playoff team if they can, keep it together, play well on the road. I think Kansas, and also another team that's in there, an interesting team, I think is going to be Kansas State. Will Howard obviously going to Ohio State. A lot of people counting K-State out. I just think if they can get rolling, there's two potential Kansas teams that are going to be really good this year.
Yeah, I like both of those picks. I think Kansas State is going to be solid. Let's not forget the reason Will Howard left Kansas State was because he was not going to be the starting quarterback. So it's not like they have a huge question mark at quarterback. They had their guy. Will Howard wasn't going to be the starter and was told to go find a new home. So I don't think Will Howard's a huge loss. I mean, I think he's a good player. I think he might be better than what they have at quarterback, but the guy they have is younger, more athletic, gives their offense a different dimension, they thought. So I don't hate them for doing that. But Kansas is going to be good. I think Arizona is a really good team too. I think that's one that people are starting to talk about. Obviously, Jed Fish left, so it'll be kind of a question mark as to what that team looks like under a new head coach, but they have talent at quarterback. They have probably the best wide receiver in college football, or at least one of them outside of Luther. Michigan fans are a little upset right now. I spoke with a few after this dropped in some chats and things like that, and they can't quite figure out why Notre Dame is ahead of them. And that was the sentiment. They were fine. They don't think Penn State should be either, but they understand Drew Aller is a more experienced quarterback, but they don't understand why Notre Dame is. And so I thought that was interesting. I went back and forth with a few of them a little bit and just told them, like, hey, the rosters are similar. I mean, you have both of them lost offensive line talent. But both of them brought back a lot of defensive talent. Michigan probably has one of the top 5 defenses in the country. Notre Dame absolutely has one of the top 5 defenses in the country. The main difference is Notre Dame's quarterback is a little, I mean, not a little, he's a 2-year starter. He got injured, but he's more established. Michigan doesn't have an established quarterback. And I think that's where you look at the first 7, 8 teams on this list. The only one without an established quarterback is Ohio State, and they're only number 2 because of just the sheer amount of pure talent on that roster. And Will Howard is somewhat of an established quarterback, assuming he's the starter, which I think he will be named the starter later this week. But Michigan's the first one with a question mark at quarterback. Ohio State, I guess technically a question mark at quarterback, but you know the amount of talent on that roster outside of that. I mean, you have the best running back duo in the country, probably the best wide receiver room in the country, one of the top 5, if not the best defense in the country. So I think quarterback play for the first 8 teams is pretty well known.
Well, let's look at it this way. When you go down the list, you have Georgia, Carson Beck, Ohio State, Will Howard, Oregon, Dylan Gabriel, Texas, Quinn Ewers, Jalen Milroe, Alabama, Jackson Dart, Ole Miss, Riley Leonard, Drew Aller, Michigan. Mm-hmm. Is it Tuttle or is it Orgy? You got DJU at Florida mm-hmm. State, Brady Cook, Cam Rising, Garrett Nussberger, Cade Klubnik. Mm-hmm. And who's the starter at Tennessee?
I was trying to think of that myself.
But regardless, Nico's the starter.
Oh yeah. Yes,
And Dylan Gabriel got unseated at OU. Now, when you get to Oklahoma State, Miami's got Cam Ward. Cam Ward is, I think, going to be good this year. I think he was playing up in Washington where there was nobody. Washington mm-hmm. State, he didn't have a lot of weapons, and I think Miami could possibly take the next step, or it's going to be some issues down there for Cristobal. And then you have A&M's guy slipping, Connor Wagman. Mm-hmm. So out of the top 20, a lot of those teams have established quarterbacks, and I think Michigan is the only team in the top 10, but the question mark. So I'm not buying that Alex Orji is Cam Newton. So I'm not buying that stuff.
If it's Tuttle, I think that's even a bigger problem. I think it has to be Orji, or else you're really in trouble. And I think Orji is going to be a question mark for at least the first few weeks. I mean, the good thing is, hopefully your running back room is almost as strong as it was last year. Obviously, Donovan Edwards is back, so that helps. You lost Corum, but you've been recruiting decent at running back. Tony Alford's going to have that room probably ready to play. So if it's Orji, you just hope you can repeat what you did last year and have a good offensive line, run the ball every play, and pass it 10 to 15 times a game and win games. That's what's been proven to work for Michigan the past couple years. The difference is J.J. McCarthy had an NFL arm that they just didn't display. Alex Orji has a strong arm. I don't know if his accuracy is good enough. I don't know if he can actually make the throws, but he's supposed to have an arm. So I think Michigan is right where they should be. I don't think they lost so much talent across the board. Defensively, they lost a bunch, but they had a bunch. Offensively, they lost a bunch. They didn't have as much. So I think that's a pretty good spot for Michigan to be top 10. I would actually put maybe Florida State ahead of them, but that's just me.
Right. It's Michigan. They're in store for a tough year, I believe, but they might not be. We're going to find out how good Michigan is when they play Texas, bar none. So we'll know after they play Texas.
Yeah, that'll be a really eye-opening game one way or another. Either they're going to go out there and they're going to use their defense to shut down Quinn Ewers in Texas. It'll be a close game. I think even if it's close, they probably lose, but losing a close one is going to look good. If they can't stop Quinn Ewers, I don't think Michigan has the firepower to keep up with them. So it'll be a little more lopsided, but or they stun the world, go out there and beat Texas. I've never been on the Texas is back train. So either way. But just wanted to touch on the top 25. I think it's always fun to go through what people think is going to happen over the course of a football season. Obviously, we know from history that this top 25 will look a lot different by the end of the year. Absolutely. Go Irish. Love it. So speaking of Notre Dame, I want to jump in and talk about, obviously, we've gone through their schedule. We've talked about Texas A&M already, so I'm not going to break down that game again. If you want to, go back probably about 2 months ago and watch our breakdown of Texas A&M and what we think needs to happen for Notre Dame to go into Kyle Field week 1 and get a W. But I think the most impressive or the most important game on the schedule is probably that Florida State game in November.
And before we hop all into Florida State, if you're watching on X/Twitter, if you can hit the like and subscribe button, help us grow the show, share the show with somebody that is also a college football fan. We're a Midwest show. We talk Notre Dame, obviously, and the surrounding teams in the area. So if you can, hit the like and subscribe, and also give us a follow. All of our links for the show are posted in the description, and we're going to start coming out with some micro content and some other content that Carter's going to be working on. So just a little bit of a shameless plug to break the show up a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Go out there, like and subscribe. I'm going to have some really good videos coming out. I'm going to try to get some interviews that we can get done too, get some different things, some different perspectives on college football and everything as we get ready for the season and get into the season. But jumping in, man, Florida State returning, top 10. Obviously, we know how last year ended for them. Got snubbed out of the playoffs at 13-0, ACC champion. Obviously, injuries played a factor in that decision. Went out, played Georgia in the bowl game, and got rocked by like 60 points with their, essentially their club football team playing. But looking towards this year, they're looking to rebound and continue to build off Mike Norvell's success and continue to build on what they've accomplished thus far and make a playoff run and hopefully win the ACC again. They have a lot of tests. Obviously, they are going to be probably Notre Dame's biggest test outside of they're probably Notre Dame's biggest test. Notre Dame's got Clemson, Florida State, USC, and A&M, and I think Florida State's going to be the best of those 4 teams. Obviously, there's some other Big Ten schools in there and ACC schools and things like that. But looking at Florida State, so this roster looks a lot different than it did last year. Florida State ranked 83rd overall in returning production with 58% returning. On offense, that returning production was only 56%. Now, the one thing they do have going for them on offense is they returned pretty much their entire offensive line, and it might be the most experienced offensive line in college football. So DJU obviously comes in. We'll talk about him a little bit more. And he's going to be behind a veteran offensive line that can hopefully keep him safe and keep him healthy. And then on defense, they returned just 60% of their production. So they had some very major players leave, but they also brought in quite a few players. So some of the players that were, on the team last year, most of these players went on to the NFL, so there was no way to keep them. Obviously, Jordan Travis, their star quarterback, got hurt at the end of last year. It was a senior season. He couldn't have come back. Trey Benson, the running back, everybody knows the social media goat, Keon Coleman, who gives you a clip every time he speaks. Jared Verse, the defensive end. Braden Fisk, the defensive tackle. And then in a story, I don't know if you saw this. Do you know the name Rodney Hill?
It sounds familiar.
So Rodney Hill was a running back at Florida State, ended up transferring to Florida A&M or Florida Atlantic, one of those, and then is now at Arkansas. So he's playing in the SEC at Arkansas, but he recently came out and said that he never really wanted to leave Florida State. What happened was his parents, when he was in high school, hired an agent for him. His agent was trying to get NIL money after he got to Florida State and was texting other schools acting like he was Rodney Hill and entertaining offers for him to leave. And I believe Florida State found out about it and told him that he needs to enter the portal then. And so he didn't want to, and he entered the portal, ended up going to Florida A&M, didn't want to be there, got an offer to go to Arkansas. So now he's at Arkansas, but he never even wanted to leave Florida State. So just a little side note, if you have a kid or you are a kid in high school that's going to be a big-time college football player, be very careful who you trust. That's just – I feel bad for the kid because he probably, from the sounds of it, he really liked Florida State and he liked the coaches and the program and he wanted to be there. And his agent was just out there trying to get him a bigger bag and didn't really let him know what he was doing.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate situation, and that also ties into the street agents of the world. These private coaches, you got to be careful. There are some people that act in a predatory fashion when it comes to your kid and they want to take advantage, and that's just an unfortunate situation.
Yeah, so obviously the biggest losses are going to be Jordan Travis at quarterback. He was absolutely a Heisman caliber player last year. Was really disappointed to see the injury derail his season, not only, but also his team season. Kept him out of the playoffs. Really just ruined college football for me for the last year. The playoffs, I think, I don't disagree. They got the 4 best teams at the time in. I don't think Florida State would have had much of a chance without Jordan Travis, even if every player opted in and played. However, all that did, and I'm glad it's going to 12 teams because hopefully this won't happen ever again. I mean, you'll have arguments over, if the 13th best team should have gotten in or not, but you're never going to have an undefeated conference champion not get in the playoffs again. That's just never going to happen again, thank God. But obviously major loss. Now, they did go out in the transfer portal, and they had probably the second best transfer portal class, I believe, or at least in my eyes, outside of Ohio State. Brought in DJU from Oregon State, obviously started his career at Clemson. Big-time player. I think he's going to be absolutely phenomenal in Florida State's system. As long as he stays healthy, I think he's going to have a big year. And then they went out and they did exactly what Ryan Day and Ohio State did when Nick Saban retired. They raided Alabama, which if you ever get the opportunity to raid a program like Alabama, it's a pretty good program to raid. So they went out, they got Roydell Williams, the running back from Bama, Malik Benson, the wide receiver, and Earl Little Jr., the defensive back, on top of some others. All 3 of those guys, I believe, are impact players. Malik Benson is a stud. Earl Little is a good defensive back. I think he'll be effective and contribute. And then maybe their biggest get was they went out and they got Marvin Jones Jr. from Georgia, who is a big-time recruit, was a big-time recruit. I think he's a stud athlete. I think he's going to be absolutely dangerous on the defensive line.
Right. And I think DJU is the biggest out of looking at those guys, because they filled the number one need that you got to have. And the thing with DJ is that he's been through the transfer thing. He went through the whole Clemson experience, and a lot of people are still holding the Clemson experience against him. But, there's that guy on Menace to Sports, Zach, has also said that, Trevor Lawrence, every year he was at Clemson, he got worse. So in the DJU, there's been a couple of film breakdowns that offense is archaic. So
when he was at Clemson, I mean, he was not set up for success. They didn't put him in a position to win. They tried to force him to be Trevor Lawrence. And when his skill set wasn't the same and when he wasn't performing, they didn't try to do anything else. They just went out and said, here, this is what we do. Go do it. Oh, you're not doing it well? Continue to do it. Here, we're going to keep calling the same plays. And so he really got a bad deal at Clemson. I think it's an indictment on Clemson when you have a guy like DJU go to Oregon State, perform the way he did. And now I think he's a bona fide Heisman candidate at Florida State. If he has a good year, he'll be in New York for the ceremony. And Cade Klubnik will be eating burgers, sitting back at home watching it. And, Clemson, that's another – we'll break down Clemson because that's another opponent, but that's another conversation for another day. But Clemson's on its way out. So DJU is absolutely the biggest kid. I think he's the second biggest. He's the second best quarterback transfer in this offseason. I think Dylan Gabriel is going to prove to be the best one and maybe the most important one. I think Will Howard's probably the most important one. He's definitely not the best, but I think his play and what he means to Ohio State will be more important than anybody else, because if he goes out there and is even mediocre, they should have a shot at a national championship. DJU, I think, has to go out there and be really good, which I think he can be for Florida State to have a shot at the title. But I think all in all, did a great job this offseason. Florida State continues to recruit at a high clip. They're bringing in talent left and right in the portal and in high school recruiting. I like Mike Norvell a lot. I think he's got this thing humming. I think he's finally got this thing back to where it was before Jimbo Fisher blew it up and they made a couple questionable hires and things like that. And I think I think he'll be there for the long haul as long as they keep getting the recruits and keep performing the way they do. And if they do get out of the ACC, I think they'll find a home and be very successful under him. Now,
Also,
yeah,
when it comes on the piggybacking of when they moved on from Jimbo Fisher, how in the hell did Willie Taggart get that job?
I think Florida State fans, including my buddy Snaps in the comments, was probably asking himself that every day. I don't know. I've never seen maybe a more ill-prepared coach in my life, but he got the job. He ran the program into the ground, and thank God Mike Norvell's come in and kind of got it back on the tracks, you know. Because one thing I will say, and we'll go jump into kind of previewing them against Notre Dame here in a second. One thing I do want to say, I hear a lot of people kind of give Florida State shit saying they haven't been relevant. I don't know if there's been a more relevant program from the 1990s till now outside of Bama, maybe Georgia and Ohio State. I mean, you're talking about in the 90s, Florida State was the program. The late 90s, early 2000s, Bobby Bowden winning national championships. I mean, they were one of the marquee programs in college football. Obviously, it had some down years, but even Jimbo won a natty with them in, 2012?
13, I believe.
13, that's right. Yeah, 12 was Bama against Notre Dame. But yeah, 2013 won a national championship. They've been relevant. They've had down years. Don't get me wrong. They haven't been a 10-win program every single season, but there's not many programs across college football that you could say have been more relevant than Florida State over the past 2 decades. So that's just my 2 cents. I would say you'd have Georgia, Ohio State, Bama, Notre Dame maybe a little bit more relevant, but they haven't won a natty. They've just been in more big games, I guess.
What happened to Florida State was it was unexpectedly Clemson got really, really good with the Dabo years. So they got really, really good, and it kind of threw the ACC, I think, into a bit of a tailspin because Florida State did dominate the ACC for years. So the emergence of Clemson being really good took some of the shine away from Florida State, in my opinion. But now that, Mike Norvell's there, and I believe they have the program on the right track and trending in the right direction. Last season was an unfortunate incident. George Travis' leg, he got hurt. If he stays healthy, they win that game by 50, and they probably go into the playoffs, and who knows what happens at that point.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they definitely make the playoffs at least. And yeah, I mean, across the ACC, outside of Clemson, Florida State's been the most relevant program over the past decade. Miami fans can try to talk all they want. You guys haven't been relevant since 2001. So, but Miami's back this year. I think Miami's going to fight for the ACC. I think they're going to be a good team. I think Cam Ward's going to be good, and Cristobal has one last shot in him. But Florida State's going to, I think, end up winning the ACC. I don't know about easily, but I think, it'll be somewhat easily. So obviously they lost a lot. They brought in a bunch of transfers and recruits. So how does this translate to on the field, especially in their matchup with Notre Dame? I think when you look at it on paper, Notre Dame has a better defense overall. I think the main issues are going to be kind of what we've been talking about for Notre Dame all offseason. Number one, obviously Riley Leonard has to be healthy for that game. That's the number one thing. If Riley Leonard's injured, it's going to be a very, very tough game. It's going to be a tough game either way. But and then you look at the skill positions. I just think Florida State on paper has an edge at the skill position offensively. You got, Malik Benson and some of the wide receivers there are just a little bit better than what Notre Dame's going to trot out there. I think Chris Mitchell has a chance to be a good receiver if he ever takes over fully and becomes that. Running back, I don't know. I know Florida State has a pretty deep running back room. Notre Dame has a great running back room. I know they're dealing with an injury here or there, but I think ultimately, and then offensive line is the biggest disparity. Florida State's offensive line is probably going to be one of the best offensive lines in college football. Notre Dame, especially after the recent injury to Charles, I forget his last name at the moment, but especially with that torn pec, he's out for the year. You're going to be replacing a starting left tackle that was already replacing a potential college Hall of Famer in Joe Alt. The offensive line is going to be where you see the biggest difference. Now, on the reverse side of that, Notre Dame's defensive line is going to be very good. So I think they'll be able to slow the running game down. I don't know if they'll be able to get the pressure that you'd hope to get from a front four or front five on DJU. But Florida State's defensive line is no joke. I mean, you're going to, like I said, Marvin Jones Jr. is going to be a problem on the edge. And if Notre Dame's tackles aren't up to Notre Dame standards, you're talking about Riley Leonard having to move around and run a lot. And for somebody that deals with an injury history, that's not exactly what you want. So I think it's going to be a really tough game. Just breaking it down from that perspective, before I give a prediction or anything like that, I'll get your thoughts.
Well, when it comes to the Florida State, when it comes to Florida State, I think when it comes to you were talking about offense, defensive line, I think we're going to find out what Notre Dame is week one, going to Kyle Field, where they need to work on if they got holes in the offensive line. The biggest thing, we've been saying this for 3 straight months. The biggest thing is you have to keep Riley Leonard upright and healthy. If that does not happen, it's not going to be a good year for Notre Dame. And as far as the other podcasts out there that want to talk about us that don't want to name us and say that we don't know what we're doing, well, how is it now that everybody that's the top of the food chain in the Notre Dame podcast space is talking about issues at wide receiver recruiting, and also the lack of depth at the offensive line? We were talking about that in April. You guys are just late to the party or don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, Marvin Jones Jr. and Patrick Payton are 2 studs at defensive end. And they are going to be, I think, a problem if the tackles aren't up to what Notre Dame's historically had. I think the interior offensive line for Notre Dame is going to be solid. I know that the interior defensive line for Florida State is solid. Here you go. Yeah, right here. Farmer and Jackson are really good players at deep tackle. And I think the interior offensive line will be fine and be able to hold up against those guys. My worry is on the edges. And that can impact the run game for sure, but it definitely could cause havoc in the pass game. But good news for Notre Dame is they are going to have one of the best defenses in college football. So they'll be able to slow down Florida State's offense enough to stay in the game and to keep it competitive. The other good news is it's in South Bend. It's going to be a night game in South Bend, which I've been to a few of those. Most notably the Bush Push game. And so it's going to be a fun atmosphere, and I give the edge to Notre Dame because of that. So I think it's going to be a hell of a game. I think it's going to mimic and be similar to the Ohio State game last year for Notre Dame, where it's going to be low scoring defensive battle, kind of back and forth. I got Notre Dame winning 21-20.
I hate to, going against the grain isn't always popular. I like Florida State. DJU gets some revenge, 27-24.
Okay. I think the main reason Notre Dame wins is because I think Marcus Freeman and that defensive staff have learned how to count to 11.
Well, you still got Al Washington, so anything's possible. Oh, did
Absolutely.
I say that? Did I say that out loud?
Anyway, so just a little preview of one of the biggest games in the college football season. Definitely one of the biggest games on Notre Dame's schedule, and probably one of the biggest games on Florida State's schedule. And then kind of jump into, as we wrap up, talk a little bit Notre Dame update, just kind of go through, as I mentioned, under 20 days till kickoff in Kyle Field, 19 days to be exact. And I saw this come out today, and it's just warmed my heart, Duke. Riley Leonard was asked about fall camp and kind of what his days look like in not football related, and he had this to say, and this is what you want to hear from your starting quarterback. He said that he sleeps a lot, watches a lot of film during lunch, and then I could do without the 5-minute phone calls to his girlfriend. Just don't talk to her for a couple weeks. You don't need her. But it's straight football at Notre Dame. So he's a football guy, man. It sounds like he is leaning in, and he's got his priorities for the most part straight. So it's all going to come down to health and if he is ready.
I can't argue that. The big thing with me is that you need Marcus Freeman is starting to develop a culture with guys that want to be Notre Dame football players, because it's one of the most different programs outside of the power programs, out of the Power 5 or Power 4 now. You gotta have people that are bought in and people that want to be there and be there for the right reasons. So I love this. I talked to people that where Riley Leonard's from and think he's a dark horse for the Heisman. So we'll see. They just got to keep him healthy and keep him upright.
Yeah, absolutely. I like his mentality. I've said all offseason, I like the kid. I think he's going to be really good. My major concern is if he can stay healthy. I think if he's healthy, he's going to go out there and he's going to be an upgraded Sam Hartman and be everything that Notre Dame fans thought Sam Hartman would be, and maybe a little bit more. Obviously, we know there's some question marks around him on offense, but he has the skill set to elevate guys around him with his legs and with his ability to throw on the run and extend plays. I just don't want to get in a situation where we're relying on him as a running back instead of a quarterback, because that's going to lead to a lot of hits that I don't want him taking, because durability is a question mark. So
yeah, that's something that we've talked about at length, and I'm not above running the quarterback, but don't run him into the ground. That is the main issue, because he's not Cam Newton. There's not very many Cam Newtons out there.
No, and you even saw it in Cam Newton in his NFL career. He ran the ball too much, and it shortened his career by a lot. He became a lot less effective towards the end of his career because of how much he was running the ball at the goal line situation, how many hits he was taking. It probably cut his career in half. He could have been a really good quarterback for a lot longer, but his main – he was a good passer, don't get me wrong. He could throw the hell out of the ball, and he was pretty accurate. But what gave him a different dimension was his legs. And it's similar to what Lamar Jackson does. Lamar Jackson's smarter about it and doesn't take as many hits, thank God, because we've seen what happens to a la RG3 when you're an idiot running the football and just take every hit possible. But Riley Leonard is not one of those quarterbacks. He's a good quarterback who can run the ball, who can extend the plays with his legs. He doesn't have to, though. So as long as we can keep him within the system and keep him healthy, he's going to be a very good quarterback in college football this year. I wouldn't go as far to say he's going to win the Heisman, but I've been wrong about things before, and I would love to be wrong about that.
I just said dark horse.
Yeah. But on the defensive side, a couple things that have stood out. So Xavier Watts, the safety, had 7 picks last year, absolute stud. He's adjusting because now, he's always been the younger guy in the room with some other guys, and now he's really stepped into, from what I'm hearing, a leadership role. He's out there getting the secondary lined up, making calls. He's a vocal leader on defense. Obviously, you have the linebackers that are going to be calling the defense and everything like that, but he's kind of the center fielder out there, getting everybody lined up, making sure everybody's in position, knows the calls, knows the coverages, and he's doing a great job. The one thing I thought was funny, and this is just a defensive back's mindset, man. I played safety in high school and was a defensive back for many years. And he had 7 picks. He had a fumble return for a touchdown, but he hasn't had a pick 6. And so they were talking to him about it. And he's like, man, I just want to get in the end zone. I want a pick 6 so bad. And it's like, man, you had a great year, and you're the only thing you can focus on. And there's no feeling in the world like taking an interception to the house. I get it. But he's out there making plays. Said his goal is 10 interceptions this year. I think if he gets 10 interceptions this year, he's going to find himself on a lot of award lists at the end of the year. And specifically maybe the All-American list. But he's been looking great. Linebackers have been kind of a question mark. Obviously, dealing that there was an injury that took out one of their linebackers. But the linebacker coach, Max Bolo, it's his first year as a full-time coach. He was a grad assistant intern type guy last year, was the de facto linebackers coach. And he said something today that it's not a red flag for me, but they're going to roll with 5 linebackers that rotate. Is that a red flag to you?
Well, in the modern college football, you only really use 2 linebackers right now.
Majority of the time, yeah. Sometimes
majority of the time.
Yeah.
The big thing for me is that if you're getting guys in the game and they're getting meaningful snaps, they better be able to produce. And maybe they got a couple of guys right now that are real close. Mm-hmm. And so if you play everybody, some guys will eliminate themselves like, hey, maybe this guy's not ready to play just yet. So maybe it's a way of weeding out who's going to be the guys that get the majority of the snaps.
Yeah, I think that's possible. I'm more of the school of thought and the train of thought that I would rather have 3 guys that have proven they're the number ones and rotate them than have 5 guys who haven't proven that. Now it could be, and the comments from Coach Bola was that he has 5 guys that he can trust to go out there on any play and make the play. So if that's the case and you have 5 guys that you trust, no matter what situation, you can put any 5 of them out there and they're going to be in position and make the play. I mean, it's hard for me to imagine that being a bad thing. However, there is something to say, or something that can be said about being in the game and getting into a flow of a game and understanding what's going on. And I think if you rotate too much, you can disrupt that ability for a player. And then you're constantly, if you go out there, you play a series, and then you don't go back in for 2, 3, 4 series, it's constantly like your first series of the game all over again. And you can't get any kind of continuity on defense. And just to give you the names here, we had Jack Kaiser, Jalen Sneed, Drake Brown, Jaden Asbury, and then Kingston Vilmaasa, who's a freshman. And I love seeing a freshman on the list because that means he's shown something. That guy can play. He's young. He's probably going to make mistakes. He'll probably be the last guy that gets rotated in. But if he's putting himself in the mix with 4 other guys, that means that he's actually absolutely out there tearing it up in fall camp. So
right,
it's just something to monitor. I have trust in the defensive staff because of their track record of putting really good defenses on the field. So I don't know if this is going to work, but we'll see. And it could be something where, and I hate to do it week 1 against Texas A&M because normally if you had a lesser opponent starting out the season, maybe you do this for the first couple weeks to let them, like you said, kind of weed themselves out, find who's a gamer, who's going to make the plays, and then you shrink it down to 3 guys. But going into Kyle Field week 1 with a 5-man rotation, I mean, that's good for depth, but it could put you in a position where you have the wrong guy out there on the wrong play and it leads to a broken coverage or a missed assignment or something like that. And that could be the difference between winning and losing a game that could be as tight as Texas A&M might be.
Right. And the big thing with that too is Texas A&M, it's going to be hot and you're going to have to rotate. And I'm not above rotating guys in either, giving some guys a break every now and then, but also I don't want it to be, the wide receiver room at Ohio State where you just play 3 guys the whole entire game, or the defensive line where JTT and Jack Sawyer played the entire Missouri game. Like you got to give a guy a break every now and then. Give him a blow, and it's going to be down there, Texas A&M. Going to be probably 90 degrees, humidity through the roof. It's going to be a scorcher.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you definitely want to have depth and rotation. I think that's good. I've seen it both ways. You just mentioned 2 Ohio State examples where they didn't rotate nearly enough or at all. But I've also seen programs, and Ohio State actually did this at one point, where you're rotating so much, especially at defensive line, where you're in a pivotal point of the game and you don't have Chase Young on the field or something like that. And it's like, okay, you got to have some common sense. Like, yeah, I understand he just played last series, so you would rotate the next series, but it's the 4th quarter. We need to stop. You got to have your best guys on the field. I don't care if they've played 3 series in a row.
Or be in a pivotal game at the goal line and be the defensive line coach, and you've been rolling 5 guys all night, and you turn to your right and realize you got 3 guys on the field and you got 3 on the sideline. Maybe you have an issue there.
Yeah, absolutely. But anyways, just a little update from fall camp. Everything looks good. Haven't heard of any new injuries really, so that's good news outside of obviously the tackle that's out for the year. So love to see that as we get deeper into fall camp. The less you hear about players and stuff like that, the better news it is. You don't want to hear anything about injuries right now. But switching, I know last week, last show, we didn't get into some of the recruiting stuff, so I did want to give an update on some of the recruiting stuff that's going on right now. Obviously, it's not a very there's not a lot of movement in recruiting right now. It's a pretty dead time for recruiting. A lot of it is focused on the 2026 class or the 2026 class and getting those guys lined up and starting to, close some of them and get them closer to commitments. But a couple things did happen. Brandon Logan, a safety, flipped his recruitment to Notre Dame, and it's come out he's going to play baseball and football at Notre Dame. He was originally committed to Vanderbilt, I believe, for baseball, and then he decided to commit to Notre Dame for both.
Yeah, I seen the kid play in high school. Pretty solid player. We'll have to wait and see how this goes. The expectation isn't super through the roof, and it's not, super through the floor. I think he's a developmental kid. Put some weight on him, get him in the weight program. We talked about that the last show. When guys get into spring ball, fall camp, hitting the weights hard. So it's for me, it's a wait and see. The biggest thing that I was disappointed with is that we got not to say he's not a bad player, but you got to fill team needs, and wide receiver is still a gaping hole. Like Marv said in Home Alone 2, wow, what a hole. Maybe I'll be wrong. I hope I'm wrong, and I'll probably get receded to death if they go out there and they produce. But it's back at it. Shaky offensive line mixed with shaky skill players, and we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not to get Notre Dame fans' hopes up too much, but I believe at least the last player that I know that played both baseball and football at Notre Dame is a little bit of a legend. A guy named Jeff Samardzija. Went out. He was a great wide receiver. Ended up playing for at least a few years in the MLB as a pitcher. So who knows? Maybe this guy could be the defensive Jeff Samardzija. But we'll see. Wide receiver is still a huge question mark in the 2025 class. I know we talked at length about wide receiver recruiting. I didn't get to it last week, but there is rumblings, rumors starting to swirl that there is a certain 4-star wide receiver that's committed to a Big Ten program that is interested in possibly flipping to Notre Dame. And if that were to happen, that would be a huge get, because obviously after losing Meadows and kind of some of the misses they've had in the wide receiver room, if they could flip a 4-star wide receiver, that would be big time. I'm not ready to say his name just yet because I haven't gotten clarity on how likely that is, but as soon as I do, I will let everybody know. And then obviously the looming question that we still continue to talk about and monitor on a daily basis is none other than Deuce Knight. So we've talked about it every week for the past few months about what's going to happen with Deuce Knight. Duke broke a couple months ago that it was looming that he was going to flip. Originally thought to Ole Miss. Now it's looking like it might be Auburn, but somewhere in the SEC for sure. I was on record as saying that I could see it happening. I didn't want it to happen, and I didn't think it would happen. I have since talking to people and since a couple months have passed, changed that thought process, and I do believe he will end up flipping. The thing that's good right now is that he hasn't yet. So I think I talked about it last week a little bit, but the only hope Notre Dame has on keeping this kid is if he stays committed to Notre Dame up until the season starts. Once the season starts, if he's still committed to Notre Dame, I think Notre Dame has a much better chance than I actually believe they have right now. So right now, still committed. Notre Dame's plan is to keep the full court press on him, to keep, for lack of a better term, blowing him every day to keep him happy. And go into the season with him committed, go out there, beat Texas A&M, show him that Notre Dame's able to go and play with SEC caliber opponents and hopefully rebuild some momentum with that. Wilt Fung actually obviously came out and said that he talked to sources around Deuce and others with knowledge, and he's got a very keen eye on being closer to home in the SEC, which has been something that's been we've talked about for months. Right now, it looks like the leader in that camp is Auburn, and Ole Miss is still throwing every Hail Mary they can at him. Wilt Fung also said that the rumor is that Deuce wants to shut down his recruitment prior to his senior football season, which is about to kick off in the next couple weeks. Which, if that happens, like I said, that's bad news for Notre Dame, because he would most likely, that indicates he's going to flip to an SEC school like Auburn and then shut down his recruitment to focus on high school football.
Right. I think that is definitely coming. I have some sources close to this situation that it's a good time to be Deuce Knight. It is an all-out bidding war. So when it comes to ranking these teams on where I think he'll go, I'm still going to stick with it. I would say Ole Miss 1, Auburn 2, Notre Dame in a very distant 3. It's not popular, but a lot of Notre Dame fans, when we put that show out in June, nobody watched it. Nobody wanted to listen. I talked at length about this in Spaces. And some of the naysayers out there have been coming back saying, you guys didn't break this. You guys didn't do this. Well, I'm sorry, man. We recorded the episode. I gave you the information. And now that it's, since it's been said, it's coming to pass, and you can't quite deal with it because you couldn't take your blue and gold glasses off. And that's the big thing with this show. We're going to give you the information we got. And if you don't, it's not going to make everybody happy, but it is what it is. And I think the kid goes to Ole Miss. That's where I'd go if I was him. But
so just to clarify, you're still going Ole Miss over Auburn, huh?
Yep.
All right. Well, if that happens, we need to get you a Lank shirt. Let a naysayer know. But
either
oh, hold on. Sorry, Snaps. No Diddy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, we'll see. I think at this point, a lot of people are coming around to that school of thought that he's most likely not going to end up in the blue and gold. I still hope he does. I do. But if he doesn't, as I've said with all of this since March or whenever it was when Notre Dame had the number 1 ranked recruiting class, calm down. Don't get too excited. Don't get too upset. The highs are going to be high. The lows are going to be low, and everything will work itself out. Notre Dame's still going to have a top 15 class. They're still going to sign a lot of really good prospects and a lot of really good players. And they still have a very talented quarterback room right now. So don't be too alarmed if he flips. But it would be it would be a pretty big hit to their recruiting class, but they'll get through it. It happens all the time.
Well, Carter, you got anything else?
No, man, I appreciate everybody tuning in. Like Duke said earlier, if you could just go ahead and like the show, subscribe, share it with your friends, share it with your family, whoever, anybody that is welcome. As you can see, when we get people in here commenting, we'll throw some comments up on screen. We like to interact and, get some questions. If you guys have questions or anything like that, always open to banter and kind of going back and forth with you guys and whatnot. So other than that, man, had a great time and enjoy the rest of your week. We'll be back on here. I believe it'll be Wednesday night to kind of go over any news and notes in the world of sports and college football.
All right. With that being said, everybody have a good night, and we will see you back 7:00 again on Wednesday night.
Yep, that sounds good.
All right. You guys have a good one.